Hello, and welcome to another edition of Down in the Dugout, the show that covers everything baseball and so much more. On tonight's show, we have special guest Lee Kluck, baseball historian and author. He's going to be discussing his new book, his love of baseball in general, and his passion for baseball gaming. But first, as always, I'm your co-host, Bob Collars. Joining me is my other co-host, Scott Spindler, and last but not least, Chris Owija. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hey, Bob. Hey, Chris. Glad to be here.
Hello. Good to see you,
Lee, glad to have you on board.
Yep, absolutely. Love having Lee on the board. Excited to hear what he has to say. But before we get to Lee, we're going to do a little segment here called Around the Horn is what we call. We're going to touch a little bit about what has us excited, worried, concerned, or anything interesting in the world of baseball or anything else. So, Scott, take it away. What's on your mind?
Oh, well, I mean, just excited about spring training starting. Getting to check out some video of some contact hitting going on and some pitchers throwing. It was nice to see some action going on the fields. I mean, even though we can't really get close to it like a normal spring training. But today, I mean, I was kind of surprised. I turned on my TV and I saw the Tiger Woods accident. So I was a little concerned with that, and just been following that throughout the day. And so far it looks like it's non-life threatening, which is a good thing. So just kind of following up with that, and send our prayers out to Tiger.
Absolutely. He's had such an impact in the world of not only golf but sports in general.
Absolutely.
For most of our lives. So. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Big story there. What about you? Christopher?
Just honestly, just the same stuff Scott was talking about. I mean, the Tiger Woods stuff, I've definitely was paying attention to that. And I hope he's able to, obviously I hope he's okay. And I hope he's able to possibly continue his career. I don't know how serious his injuries are going to be, but it might be pretty tough.
Yeah, it's just crazy.
He's pretty banged up from this. And plus the pictures are definitely, a sight to see too.
Yeah.
Just with spring training, I'm excited. I love what I'm seeing out of the White Sox. I mean, of course, you're getting all those stories of best shape of your life type stuff, but it's still nice to see. Just like for me in particular, seeing Kopech is back, and Jake Berger too, who hasn't played in like 2 years. Seeing him run around doing some drills and stuff, it's just nice to see that everybody seems to be entering in good health. And I'm ready for the season to start.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we had a little transaction today, which will be kind of interesting to follow as the season goes on. We saw Scott Kazmir signed with the Giants. Apparently he's still throwing 92, 93. I got to meet him a few years back when he was with the Braves in spring training, and a real nice guy. Still had really good stuff. So he's one of those pitchers who came into the league with so much promise and so much talent, and he's shown promise, or I guess bits and pieces of it throughout his career where he had some success, but never really lived up to the potential that I think everybody thought he was going to eventually have. So wishing him the best too. Hopefully he gets to stick on with the Giants and make the team, and it'll be fun to watch him this year.
Well, it'll be interesting you bring that up. I'm glad you did. When I saw that, the first thing I thought of, if we all think the Giants are going to have a fun year this year. We're not saying they're going to compete, but they're on the precipice of it. But the first thing I saw that sign is if he can make the team and does well, there's a really good trade piece for him that they can trade away to a contending team, and maybe Scott finally finds his way back in the limelight a little bit for a team that's going to make a run here come October. So yeah, I like that.
Absolutely.
Yep. So for me, much like you guys, spring training, as a big Cubs fan, it was nice to see Arrieta on the field, see him throwing off the mound. Shelby Miller, who was talked about being traded to the Cubs for years and years and years and years. It was funny to see Shelby on the mound. It was fun to see him on the mound in the Cubs uniform. Once again, there's some projects for the Cubs. We'll have to see how they all play out. And then also on a personal note, turned on the PS5 today, and boom, the MLB 21 stress test is there. And so I got my hands on that. And let me tell you absolutely nothing about that because I don't want to get banned.
No, we're not talking about that whatsoever.
No.
We're not going to even mention that one more time. That's it. That's the end of our MLB The Show talk today.
That is absolutely the end of it. But I was excited that it's there, and I believe it's for a week long, isn't it? I think it's for a whole week.
I believe it is. Yeah.
I wouldn't know. I was an idiot and forgot to sign up for it. So.
Oh, you could have just stopped at.
Yeah.
I was an idiot. Yeah.
Oh, well. We don't need to get into that.
But
look at Lee's getting ready to bail already. What did I get myself into?
You guys can just sit there and take each other out. That's fine. I'm still laughing over here about Shelby Miller.
Well, I know.
That Shelby Miller thinks that's going to fix all the problems on the north side.
Oh, that's going to fix none of the problems, Lee. None of the problems.
Because he was in Brewer camp last year, and let me tell you this, he didn't throw it all.
Yeah.
So,
I think it's a good story to follow. I mean, I'll be honest, the chances of him making the club are very slim.
Are they using him as a starter?
Well, I don't know how. I think he's going to
Bullpen?
be out of the bullpen, but even then, the bullpen on the north side isn't what I would call rock solid as of now.
I mean, yeah, every aspect of the pitching, I think, on the north side is a little bit shaky right now.
Ooh.
Okay. All right. Well, at least I know where we're at right now for this evening's show. And so
Shots fired.
Yeah. So I have as much faith in Shelby Miller as you do, Lee. I just think it's an interesting story because the last couple of years, it was always talk that somehow Shelby was going to find his way to Chicago and it was going to be a good match. So we'll see. But
and 5 years ago when you started that rumor, it was probably a good thing.
But as we mentioned at the top of the show, let's leave the Cubs hate behind. And we have Lee Kluck here with us this evening. As I mentioned, baseball historian, author, general love of the game itself, obviously a Brewers fan. And so we're excited to have him with us this evening. And he's going to talk a little bit about his book, about baseball in general, about baseball video gaming. So it's going to be a fun show. So thanks everybody for being with us.
Thank you guys for having me. And I'm sorry, it's coded in my DNA, having lived in Wisconsin my whole life. If I see the logo, I just have to lash out. And so I apologize ahead of time. That probably was uncouth of me, but I figured
don't worry about it, Lee. We're used to it around here.
Well, I have nothing but praise for the last live baseball game I went to, I think was a Sox game. So I have nothing bad to say about them. And
I like this guy. He should come on every episode.
And that hat, the Phillies hat reminds me of Michael Schmidt. So,
yep.
And Harry Callis, and I really have no issues with them. So you guys are in the clear.
Oh,
all
okay.
Right. That sounds great.
I'll just turn my camera off right now then.
That, I mean, you're a good-looking guy. The demographic somewhere.
Lee, does it help if I told you that I lived in Appleton, Wisconsin for about 3 years, and that I went to multiple Cubs Brewers game and had a great time. Loved the stadium. The fans were great. Never had a crossword with any fan at all. And
did you ever go to the see South Bend play in Appleton at all?
I didn't. It's actually where I grew up in South Bend. I used to play baseball in South Bend at that stadium. I believe it's called Four Winds now, I think is what it's called. But yeah, I used to play baseball at that stadium. And then I've also been there, but I never did. Believe it or not, it was there and I just never went. I don't know why, because I love minor league baseball.
That's a good time. I mean, it's Appleton has been back in the Midwest League now for I think they're on their 20th season, or they're celebrating a big anniversary this year, and they've had everybody from David Ortiz before he was David Ortiz to Alex Rodriguez. Big Papi actually met his wife in Appleton.
Yeah.
Big Papi's wife is a huge Packer fan. And so is he. So that's always fun. But no, it helps a little. I mean, I don't know why you'd move back, but no, okay.
So Lee, obviously you have a huge love for the game of baseball, the sport itself. You have there's a respect that you have, so much so that you found yourself writing a book about it. And it's a very interesting book, though. And why don't you tell some of our listeners who may not even know the name that you're about to bring up? But
okay.
Yeah.
So a little bit of background about me. I grew up in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, which is famous for two things. One is beer, and the second one is the world's largest trivia contest. For those of you who are interested, go and Google. It's 54 Hours of Madness, and it takes place in my hometown. But I've lived there my whole life, except for graduate school when I went to the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, and I got a master's degree in history, during which I saw the 2008 Brewers lose to the 2008 Philadelphia Phillies and Chase Utley in the playoffs. Dave Bush being the only exception, which is just kind of sad in itself. But along the way, I had a heart attack at 28 years old. I'm now 40. I had a heart attack at 28 and open heart surgery. So I said, I'm going to use my degree. I have a master's degree in history. I'm going to use this degree. I've now paid for it twice. So I decided I was going to work in baseball history, and I've kind of carved out a niche for myself. I'm in a pretty neat academic community of scholars and things that, it's funny. I walk into Barnes and Noble now and see my friends' names on books, and I see them on TV shows and stuff, and I go, okay, well, I guess that's something I could do, is write a book. So I decided to write a book about the guy who ran the Brewers when I was growing up, and he built the World Series winner, but I was sort of in that next generation right after that, the mid 80s, and where we only really got two games, the Brewers once every 30 days and the Cubs on GN was about it. And so when I wasn't rooting for Rick Sutcliffe, I was following the Brewers, and so Harry Dalton was the GM there. And I remember sitting one day at my previous day job and thinking, man, how is this team in the 80s good? I mean, they had two Hall of Famers, Mountain Yount and Molitor, and that does a lot. And Jim Gantner was a really solid everyday second baseman. But that team hung around, and in the American League East at the time, with it being so jam-packed full of talent, they were routinely in the top four teams in that division. And you go back and look, and they could have made the playoffs a couple of times under the new format that we've seen since 95. And you go, how is that possible? Because I know the financial trouble is coming. And so the only thing I could come up with, and I got some of his papers from the Hall of Fame, which they're at the Hall of Fame, and Harry Dalton's. Well, those of you who don't know Harry Dalton, the easiest way that I can put it for anyone who doesn't know the career of Harry Dalton is that if he were around today, he would be Theo Epstein. And that may seem like a stretch, but he was that instrumental in not only changing the way that teams were built, but how offices were run, and also the influence of him using his brain to think about the game of baseball as a larger entity and how it could be put on a better footing for the general public. So he was a celebrity in the 60s. He started out working for the Baltimore Orioles. He was probably like the third employee hired by the Baltimore Orioles ever. Answered a letter and got a job working, and he drove cab actually at night to make ends meet. And he was the assistant farm director when the Orioles were stocking the shelves with guys like Boog Powell and Brooks Robinson and Andy Etchebarren, and then he was the farm director from about 1960 to the winter of 1965, at which point he took over in Baltimore and was the GM there from 1966 to 1971, the fall of 71. So he ends up leading them during the glory days of their run in Baltimore. They win the 66 World Series, they win the 70 World Series, and they appear in the 69 and 71 World Series. They were beat by the Miracle Mets and Roberto Clemente. And took both those teams to 7 games and very competitive series. And so historians generally think of Baltimore at that time as probably the best team in baseball, certainly the American League, and probably in baseball overall, just over the width and breadth. So he oversaw that team. Then he goes to California and he works for Gene Autry for 5 years, 6-7 years, and he sort of tries to build a winner there and puts the team in a better shape. And they then have their run in the early 80s, the late 70s and early 80s with Nolan Ryan, and then beyond that with Brian Downing and some of the guys that came around. And Bobby Grich was actually brought in by Harry Dalton. In the first big free agent move, he brought in Bobby Grich, Don Baylor, and Joe Rudy, who had played for Oakland in the mid 70s and been instrumental in their teams, and brought them in as the first big $1 million trio in baseball, right? He broke the bank, the first winner of free agency, and he was throwing money at everybody. He picked talented guys, right?
Right.
So he knew Grich and he knew Baylor from Baltimore. He had scouted and he had gotten them, and he brought them to California, and they formed the nucleus of a team that would later go on and lead California to the pennant. So in his third act, here he goes to Milwaukee. He turns the Brewers into a contender. He uses the scouting things as he's learned in his group of advisors. He had a group of advisors called the Dalton Gang. They were, in homage to the bank robbers, and it was a group of guys that had been in baseball their whole lives and had helped make Milwaukee a winner. And they reached the World Series in '82, and he actually is employed from 1978 to 1991. So he works, and then he works not as the GM, but he works in Milwaukee right up until the strike of '94. So he is literally there. You can track, his career in baseball. You can see the width and breadth of a stretch where the game just changed immensely. And he was at the forefront of a lot of those changes. He worked union stuff. He was actually well liked by Marvin Miller because he didn't believe in the hard line, well, we just need to stick it because the players are horrible, and Harry was very, very much a player's general manager for that day and age, where he believed that if you were a player that had performed well, you deserved to be compensated. Now, that didn't mean that he wasn't going to try to hold costs down. He did that too, but he was not going to try. He was not, to use another name that some people might know. He actually followed Harry in California. A guy by the name of Buzzy Bavasi, who worked for the Dodgers and the Padres, and then California, where he would try and hold down costs by telling you that you had a worse season than you did. I mean, he once tried to tell Don Drysdale and Sandy Koufax that they weren't any good, and they basically were like, okay, we're going to go make movies because you're lying to us. But, this is the kind of guy he was. He looked at Koufax and said, wow, you won 28 games last year, but that wasn't really all that good. So we want you to really bear down and take a pay cut. So I decided to write this book on Harry Dalton, and it has been the biggest life-changing experience of my career and of my baseball fandom, because I do not look at the game the same way.
Now, you bring that up, and obviously you had working knowledge of Harry before you even went down this path. But how difficult was it for you? Like, can you kind of go over a little bit how you gathered the information? Was it all through books? Was it through talking to people, interviews? Could you tell the listeners a little bit about how you went about to gather the information that you didn't have acquired yet? Yeah.
Sure, the research process. Yep. So
right.
The research process, the first thing you do is you sit down and go, why is this important? Why would anyone want to read this? And once you figured out that it was important, that he meant a lot to baseball, and he meant a lot to, you could study the larger era, right, of the 50s through the 90s, really. I mean, he interacted with everybody from Brooks Robinson, Nolan Ryan to Gary Sheffield. Okay, that's the width and breadth of his career. So you look at that and you go, okay, so now I'm going to try to read what other people have written. And outside of a couple chapters in smaller works, he wasn't really focused on. And when people looked at Baltimore, they mainly saw Earl Weaver as being a catalyst, or the fact that the players were really good. You know, they had Brooks Robinson and Boog Powell and Frank Robinson, and the pitching staff there was just amazing. You know, Mike Cuellar and Dave McNally and Pat Dobson and Jim Palmer.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't mean to interrupt, Lee, but wasn't Harry Dalton the one who actually hired Earl Weaver?
He was. In fact, Harry was the farm director when Earl was coming up through the minor league system. And in 1968, about halfway through the season, they fired former Yankee Hank Bauer and hired Earl Weaver, and the rest was history. And a funny story, you know, people think that Earl developed this fiery sense of humor, this fiery demeanor, the minute he walked in a big league dugout, and he had been doing that stuff in the minor leagues. There's two stories that Harry tells that are just hilarious. Harry died in 2005, unfortunately. So I haven't talked to him directly, though his family has been a great help, asset to me. But he did share some stories with other authors. One was the night where Earl was playing. This was early in his managerial career in Class D, and he was playing second base as a player manager, and he grounded out. And as he grounded out, he was taking so much flack from the opposing team that instead of going back to his dugout, he turned right and ran into the opposing dugout and started to fight the opposing team. And they basically threw him back on the field when they were done with him. And the
sounds like something Bob would.
Other story was Harry gets a call one night and goes, he gets a call from the league president of the Eastern League, the AA Eastern League. And he goes, you have to come in and talk to Weaver. If you don't come and talk to him, we're going to throw him out. Like, he will not be able to work here. He accosted an umpire last night so bad, the guy wants to quit. You need to come and talk to him. So Harry did. He went to Springfield, which is where Harry is from. He's from West Springfield. He flew to Springfield. He drove to talk to Earl, and they went out for, you know, dinner and whatever. And he looked at Earl and said, listen, I think you're a big league manager, but you have to get to the point where I don't have to worry if you're going to get kicked out of the league, because if you're going to get kicked out, you know, if you're going to be that big of a problem, we can't help each other. And I can tell you this, Harry Dalton and Earl Weaver, you could not get further away from those two people, right? They're diametrically opposed. Harry was very soft-spoken, never swore even at work, was a Mensa member. I mean, he was literally a genius. He could have done anything he wanted to do, and he chose to work in baseball. And Earl was this fiery guy and small and, you know, full of just life and everything else you can think of. And you'd go, I asked Harry's wife, Pat, I said, Pat, how do these two people work together? How do they become intertwined? To the point when Harry Dalton retired, the only person he kept a personal file on, of all the people he knew in baseball, was Earl Weaver. From his opening press conference to the day Earl was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. I said, how does that happen? She goes, well, Harry liked smart people. And while Earl could be crass and had a drinking problem and all these other things, he was smart and he wanted information. And if there was anything that Harry Dalton was, he was an information junkie. He did some of the first work with analytics, not analytics like we know it, WAR and all these things, though that did play in later in his career in the early 90s. But he was the first one that looked at Earl and said, hey, you want the information on splits? Night versus day versus home versus road versus this guy, career at bats? We'll get you that information. And Baltimore really pioneered that. Their PR guy, Bob Brown, was the first one to really work for it for Harry and Earl. And Bob just died here recently. So, I mean, it was, but in answer to the original question, the interview, the book writing process is a lot of that. Hey, what have other people written? Then I went back, and as a SABR member, I have access to the sporting news. So you do a search there, and I've read pretty much every article that was ever written in the sporting news about Harry Dalton. If I've missed one, it's news to me. And save them and write them, read them, save the pertinent ones. Then I start talking to his family, and his family, his 3 girls and his wife, have been unbelievable. I was going to write a very small book about Harry's time in Milwaukee from 1983 to 1992. It became a full biography when I had so much information and so many interview requests that people wanted to talk to me that I had to expand the book.
Wow.
So at one point, I'm sitting there at one point, and that doesn't happen. I mean, I'm truly blessed because that doesn't happen. So at one point, I'm literally sitting around and somebody's going, so I ran into, I got a call one day from Harry's oldest daughter, Kim, who lives out in Phoenix. And she goes, hey, I ran into Robin Yount at Ace Hardware, and he wants to talk to you. So I gave him your phone number because he really wants to talk to you about Dad. Or, hey, Nolan Ryan heard that you're writing this book about Dad, and he really wants to talk to you. Bobby Gritch is one of Dad's favorite people. You're going to want to talk to Bobby, and you're going to want to talk to this person. And, you probably should you want to talk to Bud Selig because I have his daughter's Wendy's phone number in my phone. I'll just send you her phone number and you can talk to her and she'll get you to her dad. And it's just been so, like, on one level, you're very professional, right? When you're conducting these things and you're asking and you're pulling information and you're having discussions with guys who've been in scouting. For instance, Harry's director of scouting for years was a guy that works for Cincinnati now by the name of Bruce Mano. And I've talked with Bruce extensively about prospects and the way they evaluated talent in Milwaukee. And so you're asking those questions, but like 10-year-old me is
Right.
like 10-year-old me goes to bed at night and goes, what in the hell is happening?
That's awesome.
My wife was sitting there playing cards one night with my wife and my in-laws, and I go, I'm sorry, I got this text I got to answer back. And my wife goes, who's that? I said, well, it's Robin Yount.
Wow.
That's amazing.
So yeah, there's moments where, yeah, you got to be professional. Like,
Sure.
Pete Vukovich is the best. Pete Vukovich and Dan Duquette have been so nice to me. And Pete Vukovich, though, he told me one story that I cannot tell to anyone. He threatened to physically harm me.
That was the thing with Harry Dalton. He kind of started the long succession of great GMs to kind of come down after him. Like there was Sal Bando and Schierholtz and Duquette. It was like this succession of all these great GMs. And
Lou Gorman worked for Harry. Pat Gillick learned from Harry.
Yep. It was like this tree of these just great GMs that just came from Harry Dalton. It kind of reminds me of the old in the NFL when Jimmy Johnson was the coach of the Cowboys and all these coaches fell off, and all of a sudden you started seeing all the Cowboys coaches all over the NFL. It was very similar back in the 70s with the Harry Dalton and the tree of GMs that followed after him. I mean, obviously Schierholtz is a Hall of Famer. I mean, it was just great pedigrees.
Yeah, I talked to John, and John actually was very helpful as well. He told me a couple of good stories about working for the Orioles during Vietnam and some of the challenges that were faced by people that you were making sure that your guys wouldn't necessarily get shipped overseas because they're all pretty much draft eligible. And by draft eligible, I don't mean baseball draft. I mean induction into the Army.
Yeah. But I mean, Lee, this obviously this is this project sounds amazing. I mean, I personally cannot wait to get my hands on it.
I could go on and on. I could talk all the
time. We could too. I wish we could.
Yeah, this is honestly is really. I don't know. He is way before my time, so it's super interesting to kind of just learn about this kind of stuff because like it's the part of like the era of baseball that I'm just not familiar with.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, he is fascinating. And so that has given me a whole new insight into sort of baseball, because when people say, why isn't this GM doing this, or why are they doing this, or why do scouts rate this guy so high? You have no idea as a general fan what goes into that stuff. And maybe a guy got moved not because he's necessarily a bad ball player or even a bad guy, but he's in a bad situation and they've just had enough, or why didn't, you talk to players and they go, why didn't this work out for you? Well, I didn't listen, and they'll tell you that now. They're 45 years old, 50 years old, most of them. And so they'll look at me and go, well, why didn't this work out? I didn't listen. I didn't do what I should have done to further my career, or to, I listened to the wrong people and that. So, but it's been great because I've been able to go back and re-examine a lot of my childhood memories and look at them from a different perspective.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Which leads into my other, my other foray lately has been looking at the history of the immersion of in baseball video games. So like today we put on the show, right? And I literally have had people walk in my living room and ask me what I'm watching. Like, oh, I didn't know the game was on now. And I'm like, well, it's not. It's on in like 3 hours.
Exactly.
But
exactly.
My dad was like, well, I can just sit and watch this and I'll get to bed tonight yet. This is great. So, but it was not always like that. I mean, I don't know about you guys. I grew up doing my own play-by-play. I grew, sitting there and making up rosters for yourself in front of, because you're like, oh, this would be so-and-so. They play this position. And so,
absolutely.
When you're sitting there and you're watching this now and you're going, especially the work you guys do with the rosters and all that, I mean, it's like Christmas. Now I don't get as jacked up as some people, and they're emailing 17 times a day and, they're hitting the feeder pellet and you just want to tell them to take a breath. But it's literally just, it makes the experience so much cooler. And I don't know about you guys, but there are certain things that I look at, right? as immersion things and go, okay, this is a moment where I realized something had changed for the better in like sports gaming. And it made things just like, it blew my mind. And one of them, and I was thinking of, who remembers Lobster Cola?
Oh, from MVP Baseball.
Yeah. Who remembers Lobster Cola? Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The ads and different things. And yeah, they
Right.
were stupid. They were for products that didn't exist, but you didn't care because they were giving you ads.
Yep.
You know, they were doing in-inning stuff.
Yeah, it is the evolution is amazing. And I mean, Lee, we you know, we could sit here and talk all night with you, and you know, we appreciate you taking the time to come on with us. And when is this book going to be available? When can we actually get our hands on it?
Like 45 minutes in the history of the world. Like better than therapy. I should be paying you guys.
We'll send you an email address.
Yeah.
You don't have to pay the Cubs
My
fan.
book will be out in tentatively it's going to be published by the University of Nebraska Press in 2023.
Awesome.
23. Okay.
Well, where can people follow you, and where can they find your work and your you on social media?
I'm trying to carve out a little place for myself. I kind of have a face for radio, so I don't make too many videos. You guys are an exception.
We appreciate it.
But I'm on Twitter at LCK in SP. Lee Kluck is the name that I go by, but the actual handle is LCK in SP. You can find the book on Facebook at Leave While the Party's Good. It's a Facebook page that I maintain that is pretty much all things Harry Dalton. You can find some of my writings through the Saber Bio Project. I've written for them. Such luminaries as Toma Oka and Doc Gooding. And so you can go and get some of my work through Saber. And, you know, I'm happy to interact with anybody to be completely.
Well, we appreciate you coming on with us, and we're going to make sure we get your information out there. And also we'll make sure we get all your information on our forthcoming website where we can,
I appreciate that. And,
you know, put it out there. So everybody will know where to go, where to buy your book, where to, you know, keep track of the progress on the book and all that kind of stuff. So we'd love to have you back on with us again. We can, you know, sit back and talk, you know, MLB The Show another time. And we could also, you know, talk some of the baseball season that's coming up. So,
and real quick, I will leave with two things in that regard. One is MLB The Show. I never thought that people would take to watching other people play the show, play video games. Watch people do that. And one of the people that is really big into that, and I know does some work with you, is actually my cousin, Austin Schulfer.
Oh yeah,
yep.
from the Minnesota
Twins. And
yep. Yeah. He was with us last year. He participated in our tournament we had and did a bunch of stuff. And I think that's how I first connected with you was last year through that.
Yep.
You know, we talked briefly about Austin, and he's a pitcher in the Minnesota Twins organization.
And the last thing,
really great guy, really great.
The last thing I will say about baseball in general before I leave you guys, and not to end it sort of on a down note, is when you talk about baseball here lately, I think it's really important, especially as a community that can seem male driven, that there has been a lot of issues lately with inclusion and different people getting popped for sexual harassment and things. I think the climate in baseball is really changing, and it's something that, you know, I personally as a fan am glad to see. Sort of, even if the environment doesn't change totally, I'm not naive, but it's something that needed to be addressed, and it seems like baseball is sort of having their moment of looking at those issues. So it will be interesting for me as a historian and sort of just a fan of the game to see how that trickles down. You know, you have people who are losing their jobs left and right now about stuff they did 5, 6, 7 years ago, and they're finding out, guess what, that stuff matters.
Yeah,
there might be another book for you there down the road there.
Yeah.
There's more material.
So, you know, it's just, I wanted to bring it up quick when you guys started the show, because I think that's a big thing.
Absolutely.
The Angels might lose Mickey Callaway.
Mm-hmm.
Those types of things are huge. You've got to be a good citizen, at least on some level. Otherwise, teams are more and more saying, no, we can't stand the backlash of that. So.
Absolutely. You're 100% right. And again, we thank you for coming on with us, and it was a lot of fun. And, I'll tell you what, I learned a lot of stuff tonight, just listening to you, a lot of stuff from history that I didn't know. So we appreciate you coming on with us. And again, we'll do this again. And we'll talk some more baseball gaming and some other stuff in the near future. But again, Lee, we appreciate everything, and thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to go enjoy the last of the nice weather today. So I'm going to go out and enjoy. So you
All
guys
right,
have
buddy.
a good night. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lee. Appreciate
Thank
it. Yep. All right. And then on Thursday, we're going to be back with talk of new trailer, I think, for MLB The Show that was dropped, and maybe a little bit more news on Thursday. And then as always, though, we want to thank everybody who takes time to listen and to watch, both through our YouTube and through our podcast. If you like what you see and you like what you hear, please hit subscribe. We would definitely appreciate it. So, gentlemen, anything else?
Don't forget to rate us. Don't
Yeah,
forget
rate us.
Give us 5 stars, Bob. We need our podcast rated.
Yep.
We're on Apple now. We need those 5 stars.
Definitely. Yep. YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and a couple others. You can check all that information, not only about tonight's interview with Lee, but just us in general on our social media site. And with that, though, gentlemen, I believe it is time for us to send into the dugout for another week. Everyone, thanks for joining us. And everyone who's listening and watching, thank you and have a good night.